fight for me. And I will hold your oaths fulfilled.
Hello everyone and welcome to Action RPG. I'm your host Aaron, and for today's video we're headed to the world of Diablo IV. Yes, the Action RPG community is buzzing right now. Diablo Immortal, we don't want to hear about that anymore. We want to hear about the next truly big thing that is coming in 1 year, which is D4. And somebody sent this to me, and I want you to be able to trust me when I say I have not watched it, because I truly have not watched it. It is a 15-minute video with the people from IGN interviewing the D4 devs, getting asked questions about the game, and obviously listening to the answers. So I'm hoping that we get some new information about the game from this interview, but I have absolutely no idea. So we're gonna start it right now. It is going to be a 15-minute interview. Hopefully it's not super boring. And if you can, all the likes, shares, subs, all of that is amazing. But if you want to take it one step further, check out my Patreon. Become an instant ARPG VIP and get Patreon exclusive content like Podcast 18 that just went up. First link in the description. Okay, enough of that. Let the show begin.
Greetings, strangers. Take a seat, sit back, and stay a while and listen, because we're here with Rob Ferguson
Stay
and
a
Joe
while
Shelley
and
from Blizzard
listen, I get
to talk
it.
about Diablo IV. How
Deckard.
you guys doing?
Doing great.
Great.
So Diablo IV is being described as the next evolution of the action RPG. What would you guys say Diablo IV
He already said Action RPG. Free publicity. Sorry.
is doing that is pushing the action RPG genre forward?
So much. It's a huge game and there's lots of innovation. It's the first time we've had such a huge shared open world, from players' campaign through the world to defeat Lilith to over 100, nearly 150. In fact, there's so many dungeons it's hard to keep track, honestly.
Yeah, I think for me too, beyond the sort of the shared open world aspect of it, is just one of the big design pillars. Like Joe as game director is really pushing this vision around player choice. You know, and the idea that not only can you, previous Diablo games, you were the barbarian, and now you can be any barbarian. You can create your own backstory in the sense that you have your own customization, the depth of skill choices that you have. It's a non-linear story.
Create your own backstory?
So you can play it out of order. It's an open world that you can explore any way.
You could play it out of order? It's very MMO-like, not very Action RPG.
You want to, you can choose to play PvE and PvP, you can choose to play alone or with others. And so everything we're doing is really focused on choice. I think that's something that really pushes the genre forward.
Speaking of the barbarian, you just revealed the Necromancer. So what made you guys decide to revisit this class and make it a character that people get to play right out of the gate? Because Necromancer is typically a character that has been introduced in expansions.
The Necromancer is a class that works so well with the Diablo gameplay. And when we're approaching Diablo IV, we really wanted to make it a culmination of all the experiences that have come before, whether it's, you know, the returning to darkness that we saw in Diablo 1, a lot of the really crunchy mechanics that you could get into in Diablo 2, and our revised Paragon system, which is Captain Diablo 4, is a great example of that. To, you know, the really frenetic and faster-paced action combat of Diablo 3. We've made innovations across the board, but when we're looking at the classes, we wanted to make sure that we were hitting those classes that players have loved throughout the franchise and always want to experience. And Necromancer is front and center.
Yeah, and it really speaks to that idea of the return to darkness that Diablo 4 represents, that idea of the tone of D1, as Joe just talked about, that idea of working with the occult and dark magic and summoning the undead, and so it really leans into that feeling of it, and it is such a favorite. It's personally my favorite, and so I'm excited to be able to get, you know, and not only is it the Necromancer you kind of know and love from the previous games, but it is actually quite a bit different, and so those differences are what makes it really exciting.
So right there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then one in the back trailing 7 permanent minions, it looks like, with the Necromancer. I keep wanting to know how large an army you can have as permanent minions, because we know in Diablo 2, you could have a huge army that would stay with you for a long time, compared to D3, where it was kind of more Witch Doctor. You could make, you know, temporary summons, and then you have to keep doing them over and over again.
Before.
Well, let's jump into those differences, because there's been different variations of the Necromancer all throughout the history of Diablo from 2, 3, and Diablo Immortal. What would you say are the main differences of the Necromancer class in Diablo 4?
You know, when we talk about player choice, which is so important to Diablo 4, one of the things that we really wanted to do is introduce a unique class mechanic for each of our 5 classes, so that the experience of playing one class is totally different from the experience of playing another class. And the mechanic for the Necromancer is the Book of the Dead, which allows you unprecedented control over your army. You can configure your skeleton minions to all kinds of different skirmishers, to mages, to even skeleton priests, and you can configure your golem similarly with the Iron Golem making a return.
Yeah, and it really allows for that notion, because that's one of the things when you play in the past is like, oh, I can have minions, but my control over them has been somewhat limited, and now you can have skeletal warriors, and there's up to 3 different kinds. You can have skeletal mages, and there's 3 different kinds. You have a different golem, there's 3 different kinds. And so how you choose your play style, do I want to play aggressive, do I play defensive? In fact, there's a way to sacrifice all your minions to just make yourself more powerful, so you can just be this sort of uber dark magic necromancer that he doesn't even summon anything, but is able to use blood magic to destroy everything on the battlefield.
That's amazing.
That is exactly what I've been asking for. Literally spot on. Hold on, I gotta go.
Necromancer that he doesn't even summon anything, but is able to just sort of minions to just. In fact, there's a way to play aggressive. Mages, and there's 3
video. Skirmishers, defenders, reapers. So they said skeleton warriors, skeleton mages, and skeleton priests, and then within those, there's going to be 3 different, basically stances for what you can do. So you could pick the skill, and then you can modify the skill based upon how you want it. So for example, you can set them as aggressive, where they'll go out and fight farther away. Or you could set them as defensive, where they could stay closer to you, like right here with defenders. Or it looks like reapers, you could change them, or you could sacrifice them. Exactly what I've been asking for. Wow, that makes me excited. Okay.
Living on the battlefield.
Perfect.
Amazing. Oh my God. You touched upon it earlier, but let's jump back to it. Tell us about character customizations. Will players have unrestricted options for character customization right from the start, or is it something that they can unlock new features that they can then adjust their characters while they're playing the game?
Yeah, so, you know, in Diablo 4, we think of your class more as a vocation that any person could do, potentially. And we wanted anyone who's playing the game to be able to create a character that either represented themselves or represented who they wanted to be in the game.
I think I'm going to be a
and then match and use that character to represent the class that they choose. So you have you can create really anyone you want to look like.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we have a choice right now where there's a sort of a body type, because it fits well with sort of the armor and everything, and the gear that you have. So like druids are proud dad bods kind of thing, you know, which I completely associate with. But beyond that, like the ability to change the face and how you look, and with the hair and your markings and your tattoos, and, you know, as we talked about, like the barbarian from, say, D3 was, okay, this white-haired barbarian that came from Mount Ariat, and it.
This has always cracked me up, and maybe I'm the only one that feels this way. In an action RPG, it's an isometric view, so which means rarely you actually see yourself anyways, unless it's like a cinematic where they cut it and you are in it. In an action RPG, you are your gear. As long as your gear, how the 2D imagery looks for the 3D render, that is really what your character looks like. So I know not everybody feels that way. They at least want the male and female choice, but yeah, that's my thought.
Had its own thing, where now you can be completely different and make it your own, and that really helps with the immersion and the fantasy, that you're able to kind of lean into your role playing and what you want to be as a barbarian or as a necromancer.
So Diablo 2 and 3 followed this act structure that was pretty integral to those games, and in each act you'd have like a home base that you could return to with town portals, and the wilderness area that sprawled out and had different waypoints that took you to different spots. How does this change with the move to open world design?
Yeah, you know, it took us a while to figure out how town portals should work, actually, in a big open world, but we figured it out.
So town portals are in Diablo 4?
They are, and they'll take you back to, you can go to waypoint to a particular place if you want to, or you can town portal to the nearest major city. Diablo IV has a non-linear campaign so that you can do the story content in different pieces, which allows you to replay the campaign in a different order, which is fun. And the world is, the campaign takes you all over the world, but there's lots more world to discover after you finished it.
Yeah, it's part of the exploration is finding all those waypoints and ways that you can travel around. And so that's part of the exploration is that you're with those 150 plus dungeons and with all the different waypoints that are out there, all the local events, all the world bosses, like there's a real reason to go out and venture into the world and see what's out there. And so that's part of it. It's not just, oh, I'm on this path, this golden path through the story. There's a whole world out there for you to explore with very different biomes or environments with different monster families, and that's part of the fun. And it's actually one of the things that we just recently added as part of our testing is this progression through a zone to know, have I found everything or not? Mm-hmm. And that really well, I'm kind of a completionist, and so that notion of like, did I find all the dungeons? Did I find all the waypoints? Is it really helps sort of incentivize you to go exploring.
Okay, I feel like I keep hearing different parts of different games. I feel like Blizzard has actually learned from some of their competitors on what people hate. In Path of Exile, the biggest ARPG out, always gets 250,000 players every single league. People hate the campaign. They hate playing it for the 100th time. And now with D4, it's saying it's a non-linear campaign. You could do this part, you could do that part, you can explore. It even sounds like you don't even have to do it really if you do not want to. On top of that, they are adding in the collector. One thing a lot of people like about Lost Ark was, they hunt and try and find their Makoko seeds, and they try and find everything they can on every single continent, and then they get the little badge that they've done it. So you're appealing to the collector, you're appealing to the explorer, and the people that hate going through the campaign multiple times. You don't have to. Very, very smart. You guys know I don't give credit when it's not due. I hate Blizzard as much as the rest of you. Carry on.
You mentioned earlier the 150 or nearly 150 dungeons they have in this game. Are these similar to the dungeons of previous games with procedurally generated layouts and rewards, or are they something completely new and different?
They do have procedurally generated layouts. Monster placement's going to be different every time. You're going to get different rewards. But they're really grounded in a sense of place, and that means that you can do more planning about how you're going to tackle them. Which really becomes important when you get to the end game and you start to get into Nightmare Dungeons. In the Nightmare Dungeon system, you can get these keys, sigils, that allow you to upgrade a dungeon out in the world to become a Nightmare Dungeon, granting additional affixes and powers.
Sigils.
And the powers are the effects on the dungeon are actually based on the keys. So you're going to get a lot of keys. You might find keys for dungeons that you think are less well suited to your build or play style, and you don't have to do those. So you have really, again, a lot of player choice there.
And one of the things I love,
dungeon modifiers are on the keys that give you access to the dungeon. And it sounds like enough keys, you could upgrade the difficulty of the dungeon.
There's a new addition is like when you get into that end game too, and you're doing sort of
a long video,
working for the Tree of Whispers. This idea of do a dungeon, that this dungeon is sort of biased towards helmets, and because I'm looking for a particular legendary helmet, and so there's certain dungeons you can go to that kind of it changes all the time, so you can actually target what kind of loot you're after, and so that change really allows me again agency as a player to say, what's really weak about my build right now are my gloves. So what dungeons are dropping gloves right now, and I can go and work on that dungeon.
Can you go into a little bit of detail about how the loot has changed?
Yeah, as you said, loot is really a key component of any Diablo game, right? And
not Diablo Immortal.
We think that the legendary powers really bring a level of variability and sort of the ability for all unlimited possibilities. Really, you can get a crazy legendary power, and then that really opens the door for you to think like, well, what could be out there? It could be anything. And so in Diablo IV, we've decoupled the legendary power from the legendary item itself. You've still got unique items, which are making a return from Diablo II, that really ground that. This item has this legacy and this special power associated with. But for legendary items, the powers can roll on different items, and in fact, you can take the legendary power off of an item and apply it to another item. You can even upgrade a rare item to a legendary item through this So you have a lot more ability to customize loadout in that way.
Yeah, like the skills are a foundation, right? Like when you're making your character, you use the skills are a template for what.
They've showed us this in their quarterly development updates. You could actually pull that legendary modifier off the item and attach it to another item. So if you've got a good base, but it doesn't have the right actually legendary effect on it, part of the crafting system is changing it.
What you want your build to be. Oh, I want to be a whirlwind barbarian, or I want to be a summoning necromancer. But it's really the legendary gear you get that helps you like refine that, because it ends up sort of overpowering it a little bit. And in my example, most recently is playing as a necro. I had a pair of gloves drop that gave me an extra 2 mages, skeletal mages. So now I have this large number of mages behind me that are just destroying everything. And then you progress, and as you go up in level, those pair of gloves becomes kind of weaker and weaker, because it's no longer at your level. And in the past, you'd have to sort of get rid of those gloves, lose those 2 mages, and go, okay, my build isn't what I wanted it to be anymore. Well, now in Diablo IV, you can go to the occultist, you can extract that power off those gloves, get another legendary at your level and put it onto that. And so then you can carry that in your build forward even longer. And you can actually sort of like put all these affixes or all these powers into your stash. So you're like, oh, I may not need it now, so I'll extract it and put it in my stash for later, because maybe my build will change as I play.
So it's literally like an item. You can extract from the occultists the legendary affix off the gear and store it, and then put it on another item. I don't even know if I really like that. I mean, it sounds good, but it's, you know, when you're hunting for gear, you're trying to find that Titan's Revenge for your Amazon in D2. Now you can just find any item and then just slap it on. I'm wondering if it's going to make the hunt not as good. I mean, obviously it's going to be easier to have gear that you want, though. And a little tidbit, gear is going to allow you to make your army size bigger for Necro, because they just tease that.
There's a little bit of restriction. You can only, pass it on once, so you can't just sort of keep that power for the entire time. But that ability to make a build and hold on to it for a little bit longer, and the fact that never before have you been able to take a yellow, or what we call a rare item, and turn it into a legendary by putting the legendary power into it, like that fundamentally changes how loot works.
You hear that? You can only transfer it one
time. The things that I think really stands out in the trailer that you guys just released are world bosses. Can you talk about what exactly goes into a world boss, how there are a bunch of different players that all populate in the same world? Just kind of go over, what world bosses are all about.
Yeah, absolutely. World bosses are one of the most exciting things that we've added to the open world. I mean, alongside strongholds where you get to actually transform the world.
Right.
But in a world boss, we pull the camera out farther so you can see other players in combat with the boss, and we make these enormous bosses that, even though we pulled the camera out, fill the whole screen, and they're just wreaking havoc everywhere. You can see the treasure beast in the video we just saw, who is one of our 3 world bosses at launch, and they appear in the world on the map. And players can congregate. They're notified that a world boss is going to show up. Players can congregate. You don't have to be explicitly grouped or in a party with anyone. You'll just see other players there, and you'll all work together to take down this giant monster.
Can you talk a little bit about how PvP is going to be different in Diablo IV compared to previous titles?
Yeah, absolutely. So we knew that we wanted to bring PvP back in Diablo IV.
Thank you.
There's so many players that have fond memories of getting players' ears in Diablo II, and we wanted to recapture that experience. So when we looked at how to bring it into the shared open world of D4, we settled on an approach of defining some areas of the world that are these fields of hatred that are affected by Mephisto's influence. And when you go into one of these areas, we tell you that you are at risk of being attacked by other players. There are both players and monsters in these areas, so there's some opportunity to fight monsters or fight players, and you can have engagements where you're fighting some monsters and a player jumps you. There's a lot of really different organic things that can emerge there. So when you're in one of these areas, you can get access to this special currency, these shards of hatred that you can exchange for exclusive, cosmetic rewards that you can show off your victories. But in order to exchange them, you have to purify them first, and the purifying process takes place in this zone.
There's so much
other people are notified
in
that,
these
that
areas.
this is happening, and so you're in danger during that time. And if you're killed, you can lose your shards there. So there's a lot of interesting risk and reward dynamic.
And then finally, you touched upon it a little bit earlier with like the Paragon system and the Nightmare dungeons, but what is waiting people in the end game? Can you break down
about a minute left.
What's in store for people in the post game?
Yes. So we know that a Diablo game shouldn't end when you complete the campaign. And the end game is a really important thing. And you know, we wanted Diablo IV to have end game available at launch. And so we've been working to make sure that the end game systems are robust and that there's a good variety of them. You know, Rob mentioned the Tree of Whispers, which sends you on missions all around the world. These missions show up on the map. You can complete these whispers for additional rewards. And those also give you access to the Nightmare sigils that I mentioned earlier. Those will take you into Nightmare dungeons, which
is kind of a take on it's sort of the Diablo IV take on Rifts, right? As people think about what the end game was for Diablo III and Greater Rifts, like Nightmare dungeons are kind of a version of that, yes?
All right, well, Rod, Joe, thank you so much for your time. Diablo IV releases in 2023 on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation.
He said PC first. That is smart of him. Okay, everybody, that's the interview. I know this is over a 20-minute video. I'm so happy I went in blind so you can get my actual reaction to these questions being answered. For the most part, everything we knew already, with the exception of the necro skills. Having the ability to change your skeletons, having the ability to wear gear to give you a bigger army, being able to put them in offensive or defensive or blow them up. I'm so happy. Thank you to the member of my Discord that sent this to me. Blizzard, Activision, Microsoft, whatever company it is, you've got something good here. It looks good. Marketing looks good. Do not screw this up with predatory MTX. Don't do it. Take all the money that you've screwed out of people for Diablo Immortal and do not do the same thing with this title. You will kill it. I beg of you. What does everybody think? Did you learn anything? Does this make you more excited for Diablo 4? Do you plan on dipping your toe in this game? Let me know in the comment section below. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, check out my Patreon. It is the best way to support me into the future. Like, shares, comments, and subs. I do need all that, so please click that little red button. But if you want to take it one step further, become an instant ARPG VIP and get Patreon exclusive content, first link in the description. That's all I've got. Hopefully you were entertained or at least learned something. Aaron, out.